Kwaheri Shujaa. As I've mentioned, today is a big day. We will be laying to rest Kelvin Kiptum, and Fare Thee Well is what is headlining the front page of the Standard today. Kelvin Kiptum, though only 24, has etched his name as one of the greatest athletes in the world, whose record in the marathon is the envy of legends. As the country bids farewell to its hero today, Kenyans can only hope another like him will emerge. And you have a full coverage of this story on page 2, 3, and 31 of the Standard today. And you can see Samson Cheriot, the father to Kelvin Kiptum, holding Kelvin's son, Keegan Kiptum, as a view his body at Iten Elgeyo Marakwet County yesterday. That is a story that we'll be following today, a big one for the country. He will be accorded a state funeral, as it had been indicated by the Ministry of Sports, and you can read all about it today. Fare thee well. Also, inside the Standard today, fashion meets beat at Paul's Awards. Remember, that will be happening. Make sure you get a copy of Paul's magazine for all the details regarding these awards. And retail insurance ranked as suppliers' worst nightmare. Retail insurance ranked as suppliers' worst nightmare. That is another story inside the Standard today. Brace for more taxes. Azimio warns. Brace for more taxes. Azimio principals say the 2024 budget policy statement is only meant to prolong the suffering of Kenyans and will amount to double taxation. They, however, ruled out resumption of street protests. You have a story on page 4 of the Standard today. This is how it looks. The Daily Nation follows after, and this is the splash today. Storm over new taxes. Azimio lobbies Senate to reject a bill to charge housing levy, and that's the clash. Pain points are here. They're all enumerated for you. Tripling of petroleum regulatory levy to 0.75 per litre. Also withholding tax on payment for goods supplied to government. 5% withholding tax on farm produce supplied to cooperatives. Licensing fees review for banks, including 1 billion shillings minimum capital. VAT on educational services likely to prompt school fees increment. The opposition has vowed to block what it termed as a second wave of punitive taxes that will further burden Kenyans and shrink household incomes, even as the government, through the budget policy statement, defended aggressive measures to boost revenue collection to 4 trillion shillings amid increasing debt repayments. You have a story on page 4 and 5 of the Standard this morning. Not disturbed by the Daily Nation. Ruto to lobby for Raila AU job bid is another story there. Foreign Affairs Principal Secretary Korir Sing'oei announces the president will formally name Raila as Kenya's candidate for the African Union Commission chairperson's post, and graduates from private universities denied papers. Bariton Gesimbe was overjoyed when he graduated with Bachelor of Science in Applied Computer Science degree from Daystar University on November 10, 2023. However, his pursuit of a job has been unsuccessful because he is knocked out for lack of a certificate. His degree certificate has been withheld over a debt owed to the university by the government. Thousands of graduates from private universities are paying the price for a dispute over 31 billion shillings. You can follow the story on the back page of the Daily Nation this morning. On top, state push to protect data security privacy in artificial intelligence age. Information Cabinet Secretary Eliud Owalo tells participants at a digital summit sponsored by the publication, that is a Nation Media Group, that policies and regulations are being drafted to ensure the integration of artificial intelligence adheres to ethical standards and privacy rights. You can follow the story inside the publication today. Star is up next. IBC 500 million shillings payout. Top lawyers hit jackpot. Auditor General queries payment after supporting documents were not provided. That story continues on page 6 of the Star. And secret lover surfaces as Kiptum's body arrives home for state burial. And you can see her here, final farewell. This is Edna Atieno, who is claiming to have sired a baby with athlete Kelvin Kiptum outside the High Court in Eldoret. And also from the insets there, you can see mourners viewing Kiptum's casket at Eldoret Hospital morgue before being loaded onto a hearse set to be transported to his home for an overnight vigil. That is a story that you could follow inside the Star this morning. Kipruto Rapkir, why do we normally have this, incidences where now you pass on is when people now come to claim that we shared a baby with you? It's akin to the vultures and They always circle around when now, yeah, you have all those carcasses, yes?
But perhaps you told them to remain in the shadows. You should be courageous enough to just tell them to come out in the open. In fact, you should present them.
We should present them formally.
Yeah. Present them and say this is how...
This is the reality on the ground.
We are constituted. But they perhaps also lack the courage to come out and say, yes, this is how we are constituted, because there's nothing at risk.
Indeed, indeed.
And then once you are not there, all the risks come glaringly. So they say, I'll now not just be beautiful, I'll be bold and beautiful.
The bold and the beautiful. And of course, the bold and the beautiful, they take these particular occasions. We'll have when maybe they want to say, okay, can the family of Barack Muluka now stand up? We acknowledge them. We find it's not just Barack.
For me, I'm saying, come out, all of you now, when I'm still
That's
around.
When they all come out.
Just come out and let us
and then there's
sort out this,
murmuring and
this little matter now.
Yes.
Don't wait until when I'm in the horizontal position.
Yeah, but seriously.
But this is not a joking matter. It's actually a very serious issue. I think we should read David Milo's book titled Our Kind of Polygamy.
Our Kind of Polygamy.
Yes.
Well, I take problems with David Milo's sentiments as well, from Kadosa to
unfit for human consumption. Yeah, to know, to troubles, to the common man, to after 4:30.
You have traveled in the same street in Nairobi, the two of you. But suffice to say the following, that it's always useful that today there is what we call DNA test that can prove whether the child is mine or not mine. But on a more serious note, it is useful in life for your relatives to know each other.
Yeah.
One thing I've not believed is that if anybody told me to subject my children to DNA tests, I will not do so. Because in our tradition, any child that is conceived by your wife, when your marriage is still in...
Is alive.
Is alive.
Yes.
Is taken to be your child. And therefore, you take your wife to be responsible mother. And therefore, I would not want to take any of my children, either they look like me or they look different, because I've had to hear of experience where somebody takes his children through DNA, only for the one that does not look typically like the father to belong to the father. And some of the ones that even resemble Barack Muluka are saying not to have any DNA resemblance with Barack Muluka. So it is very important that in life, you live by faith. In life, you trust that whatever you are doing is right. And therefore, let your children be known when you are in town.
But isn't that faith predicated on trust as well? All right.
Well, the trust, I thought, which one begins? I thought you trust, then you have faith. Or is it that you have faith, then trust?
It is faith, hope, and love. With the faith, you hope also that, you know,
those are very difficult philosophical questions, and I'll not delve into the philosophy.
But no,
but I think... I agree with Mheshimiwa Kipruto that all the children under a man's roof are his children. And I think that by the same token, all his other children belong to the family, and they should be unveiled as and when they materialize. And of course, children do not fall from heaven. Yeah? The children are produced. And therefore, those who produce them should also be presented early enough. I think we are a hugely hypocritical society that we try to pretend to be very clean until certain things catch up with us. And we've seen them across the board, from very high places to low places. In fact, people in the lower places are more honest with these things. It is those of us who belong to the bourgeoisie class and the aristocracy who tend to pretend that they live differently from how they actually live. And that's why before Professor arrived here, I was saying, come here, all of you, when I'm still around.
Yeah.
And so we belong to this family.
Yeah.
If you are there.
Yeah.
If you are not there, hold your peace forever.
Hold your peace.
Yes.
Professor Kindiki, thank you for joining us. We're just highlighting the issue culturally, where, you know, you have Mpango wa Kando, and then we have incidences where, of course, unfortunately, you have passed on and you've not declared that you have another family somewhere, and things are not formal. So we have all these fights and confusion, heading to the courts, sometimes even delaying the burial, so that this might be sorted out, DNA, in the spirit of declaring your wealth, that even the Constitution, in the spirit of declaring your wealth, why can't you just declare that there is another family and you will want to now formally introduce each other, so that we avoid a lot of confusion, especially during the funeral, right? We've witnessed this, and I know it happens in many, many places where when we want to introduce and appreciate the family and condole with you, you know, during the funeral, other heads also arise that they are unbeknownst to many, maybe in the village. So this is a chance for you that I'm giving, in other words. Good to see you.
Thank you, Yeah, you know, Africa is a very interesting society, may I call African society, because you find in the West, you live a very open life. In Africa, we live in like a closed society. And some of the things you are not supposed to disclose culturally. By now, because you find we are transiting from, even now I call it transition stage from the Western culture and African culture. Traditionally, people used to declare their wives and children and everything, and it was so open. But because of now this kind of confusion, because of inheritance, because of many issues that may arise, Christianity as a religion, maybe Islamic, maybe, but not that actually Islamic, particularly Christianity, whereby they talk about monogamy, you must have one wife and all that kind of thing. That I build a culture in Africa that to have one wife is the ideal way of living. So you find that people would have several wives, but there is a first wife who is the matriarch of the family. And they feel shy because you look modern, you use more westernized, you use more educated. Maybe you are a professor or a journalist, and you don't want to be saying you have a second wife. But I think it's high time people should really move out of that cocoon and able to declare who they are and what they are in the society, whether you have one wife or two wives or three wives. It was very ideal in African society. But for now, it becomes very difficult because Africans are maybe we are not very open as we were before. So we live in a kind of a closed society because we are not Africans, we are not traditional, and you are not modern. And you look modern if you have one wife. If you have two wives, you are not very modern, and that's how the society looks at you. But traditionally, actually, having more wives was something, it was a plus in the society because you are rich, you are wealthy, you'll be able to take care of several wives and all that. But if you preach that one today in Africa, you look like you are condemned, and the people, put you in a certain category that you are not civilized and so. And I think that is the confusion that is there. And people now have mixed Christianity and culture, and they don't want to be very open in their cultural beliefs and traditions and what they stand for. And at the same time, they want to be religious. So I think I think it's a transition state. It may not happen in our generation, maybe another generation, because I don't see it happening very soon. That's why we have so many cases of people not declaring their wealth.
Mm-hmm. They're cowards.
They don't want to be very open.
Let's just say they are cowards. Practicing certain things in hiding, not coming out in the open to say we are this.
Yeah.
You see, even within the Christian context, if you look at the origins, the traditions, the roots within the Hebrew the tradition, you witness that polygamy, you witness King David with his numerous wives, some of whom he takes from other men, some of the men whom he kills before taking the wives. At least 2 are documented in the Old Testament. If you look at our own Christendom here in Kenya, for example, you find breakaway churches, starting with the Legion of Mary in 1963, what is today called the Legio Maria, because of the need to bring some of these considerations into account. You look at the African Nomia Church in Nyanza and many others, African Brotherhood, people who break away from traditional Orthodox Christianity because they have seen the need to carry forward some of our tradition. And when the chips are down, Mheshimiwa, all of us in Africa, without exception, are at some point or the other products of a polygamous marriage. If it's not your father, it's probably your grandfather or your great-grandfather, your great-grandmother, your mother. And therefore there is hypocrisy, there is cowardice, and these are things we need to sort out so that we can live the way we live. The Mzungus, before I finish,
yes,
the Mzungus have got what David Mailu calls serial polygamy, as opposed to concurrent polygamy, in the sense that in one life, the European will have been married 10 times.
Yeah. And that's normal. And that's, to them, is normal.
And that is normal. Yeah. And around here, we will also have been married several times, but living with our people together. Not like Mzungus who say, my children with my first wife, with my second wife, with... When do they cease to be your wives? If we go back to Christianity, where they say that marriage cannot be dissolved, that person remains your wife.
So the blended family. But when it comes, I thought also this was done and dusted when we had the legislation in 2014, that polygamy now is enshrined as an act. We had a polygamy act.
Yes.
Yeah. So why are still people? We've seen some of the legislators who are also in the National Assembly trying to bring out and drop their wives into also the medical, what do you call it, allowances?
The schemes.
The schemes as well, that they should be given that opportunity. Why should it be such a problem right now when it is an act?
Yeah.
And how did we come to that place that we have to legislate it?
Yeah, Dibal, you know, we are...
Or I'm far off.
No,
it's an act, isn't it?
There's a sense in which it is addressed within the marriage laws of the land, the Marriage Act. But there's also the question of where we are coming from. And it's bigger than ourselves. When you look at, for example, I belong to the Anglican Church, and we are having that debate. It's going on. It's part of the unfinished business of our Lambeth conference, which takes place in the United Kingdom every 10 years. It has recently run into the headwinds of matters to do with sex and sexuality. We have got the LGBTQ coming on board, and we have got Africans saying, okay, we could also, not all Africans, some of them, were saying, okay, we could possibly consider some of the things that you are asking, but what of our polygamy and the Europeans saying, well, we can give you your polygamy in exchange for LGBTQ
and other letters.
Other letters.
In fact, other letters, interesting that Barack, you just finished, because I was looking at the other letters on the LGBTQ. And you know, the plus keeps on, why they normally have the plus there, it's because like there's the other queerness that will actually be coming. So from the others, they have now the LGBTIQ, then there is an AA. So there's asexual, and now also there is aromantic.
Aromantic.
Yes. So this queerness, whatever aromantic is, I don't know what it is. But my question also will be, okay, you just finished.
Let me not go into the details of that, because I think that is more of the modern society of your age and those who are younger than you. But let me start with where Professor started. We are indeed a society in transition. And we are in transition in the sense that we are still shy from saying, stating the situation as is. Because, as you said earlier, we are a product of that kind of arrangement. And I'm not shy to say my father had 6 wives, and my mother was wife number 3. And therefore, I'm trying to confirm that particular position. But what worries me is not even the wives. The wives can take care of themselves, or they might even exceed before you exceed. But what worries me is the children. Because we have come almost to treat children of one of the wives to be special considered to the other children. So in such a way that when it comes to inheritance, some of the children are left out unless a man in his own lifetime deliberately is able to state who are going to be the beneficiary of the sweat that he has been able to shed in his life. Otherwise, you will realize some of the families are complaining, some family members are complaining that they are not within the network. And you know, in the African setup, the children are not necessarily the children that you fathered. Any child who was in your custody and you took care of up to a certain age belongs to you as your child. Otherwise, paternity is one of the ways of being said, this is so and so is your child. But biological children are not more important than the children that you brought up in your lifetime. Because at the end of the day, that child that belongs to another man, another wife, but you're able to bring them up during your lifetime are your children. And you actually come to allow them psychologically to feel that you are their father, and anything at variance with that particular position destroys their credibility, destroys their confidence, and their capacity even to engage in society. So I want us to look at this issue holistically, that our African setup was complete without the Mzungu coming in. And the Mzungu never brought us religion. They brought us their own culture. Because the religion from its own foundations does not have some of the nuances that it seems to come with the Western culture, that we seem to be confusing Western culture with religion or with Christianity. So that is what I strongly believe, that we need to spend more time looking at the child, not necessarily the wife. Because the wife, another man can take her away. But the child cannot easily transit to another parenthood without going through some kind of psychological trauma.
But you see, Dibar, on what Mheshimiwa says is that after transition, there is also inclusivity or inclusion. And you find that when the Western culture came to us, we had our foundations and our traditions. But now, those traditions were destroyed. destruction of traditions makes people now feel that we are neither traditional nor modern. And therefore, African traditions were really held culturally, and there were people in charge of keeping those traditions, right from the village to whatever level there was. And you find that if you break one of the required regulations, like if you are a man, you are a father, and you have wives and children and those that are in your custody, there were set traditions which you are supposed to follow. Even you cannot deviate from them. But now, aside, those ones now came, and somehow people have got different traditions, and there are no institutions now to govern people and give them directions. They are there, but very fluid. They are not really very strict. You migrate from the village, come to town, meet a woman, becomes your friend, you have a child, move to another town. So you find that, like in Kenya here, you find one man could have worked in several towns in this country, and every town he has a wife who is not even known. And it'd be very surprising, you go home and introduce, or she introduces herself as so-and-so's wife, because people don't know. But wherever you have worked, you have children and you have wives there, and you don't tell anybody. So by the time you die or something happens to you, you find people emerge from nowhere saying, I'm also a wife on so-and-so. And people really, you bring confusion. Even in the funerals and other places, you bring confusion. Because people don't know you, because there are no structures that were put in place to make this your wife traditionally. Because you are not allowed by traditions to go and pick any person that becomes your wife. There were things that were done,
You know, Professor, in Emmanudia, where I come from, you bring this lady, before the community, before your people, and you tell them, when you see this lady, please greet her and stop there. Don't ask her anything more, because she's your sister-in-law. They understand that she's your wife. Even if you have another 3, 4, or a dozen, they understand that she is your wife. So the tradition is all right. The tradition has got no issues. So certainly in Emmanudia, where I come from, and I've spent a bit of time to try and understand the African cosmology a lot more broadly, and it is basically the same. Then the community will tell you that yes, we recognize her as your wife, but there are certain businesses that are left unfinished, which we must sort out. And that means that even if she's number 5, we will have to come to Meru and tell the people of Meru or Tharaka Nithi or wherever that we are the ones who have taken your daughter, and we have come to put the things right. In other words, you don't have marriage under the bed, so to speak, or under the table. You have got to place issues on the table. And regarding children, Mheshimiwa Kirwa has something very important he's saying, and which we need to emphasize, that there will be children who are not yours biologically. They may not even belong to your wife biologically, but you have been the parent, and we do not go through the adoption processes of the Mzungu. I can go to Emmanudia today, and if I find that there is an orphan, I say, I'm taking this child to be my child. I'm going to live with this child, educate them, and take care of them up to maturity. They become mature. If you go to London and find some orphan somewhere and take them and try to look after them and say, now this is my child, you will go to jail in a few days' time. What we have lost out here is the process of then naturalizing these children as yours. In traditional Emmanudia, we would bring these children down and shave their hair, each one of them. The children
indicating?
that that you are adopting, you shave their hair, and shave your children's hair, mix it, okay? And after mixing it, you pick it and throw it at each of them, yeah? And say utter certain incantations. Then from that moment onwards, they all understand that they are siblings. Questions of later on somebody saying that you cannot have what, you cannot have the other, do not arise. And whoever brings up those kinds of questions invites a curse upon himself or herself. So we had our things very nicely and properly ordered until we started embracing some of the Mzungu cultural aspects, a culture which has even defeated us anyway to embrace and fit in snugly.
But the question will be, again, even as you say that, I wanted just to bring the aspect, especially when we're talking about traditional and the Christianity, and sometimes they're like chalk and cheese, they can mix, right? But we can see some sort of syncretism when it comes to polygamy. I think it's a story we did here at KTN News of C.S. Owalo's dad, the Archbishop, who's advocating, and I think
I've read about him. He was called Johanna. Oh, I read about him when I was a student of divinity. Yes.
You're a student of?
Divinity.
Divinity.
Yes.
Okay, you've done divinity as well.
Yes, I did divinity.
Okay. Interesting. So, so I wanted just to know because he was advocating that, and I found that to be stoking a lot of debate that has never maybe picked in the public, that polygamy is enshrined in the Bible, looking at the Old Testament. And that was his basis of why also him is having many wives, and how Christianity should embrace polygamy. This is where we're torn. Maybe now I can pick up on your knowledge of divinity. When we were talking about polygamy, and we know even maybe in the Old Testament, this were ancient Near East, traditions, the pagans, and well, maybe God was coming and using the religions of the day because that's the language that we could understand. But he tries to associate us from also the pagan practices that were there before. So how does that really play out in the public, especially in this epoch of time where we flip over to this other side of the Bible where Paul is saying, hey, if you desire to be in a certain office, you should be a man over one wife. Yeah, so there's a sort of dissonance and misunderstanding, especially when we have a man of his caliber who is an archbishop in the village. People will take his word to be a final word on polygamy.
Professor Jesse Mugambi has written a book on what he calls African Christian theology, from liberation to reconstruction. And if we just place our minds within that prism of liberation and reconstruction, then we are going to accept that there are many spaces for the possibility of approaching and looking at Christianity and Christendom from a different perspective. That even the notion of paganism itself, and which is a very pejorative and relative notion, is quite difficult to capture and say this is the person who is a pagan, because different people who practice certain things to the exclusion of others, creating frames in which they have those who are included and those who are left out, will consider so and so to be a pagan and consider themselves to be the holy, righteous people of God. And that's why in the very first instance you have got many different denominations, including in that which we call Christianity itself. There isn't anything beyond the proclamation of Christ as the focal point, that we can say they are agreed on everything else. There's such a saying that all religions are the same, but the devil is in the detail. That they each look at themselves as the holy, the righteous one, and everybody else as being blemished. In traditional Hebrew culture, we have a polygamous arrangement. We have got men of God like Abraham himself, who is the father of all these people, having several wives, including the girls who come to work for him at home, some of them becoming the wives. You have got Jacob, or Israel, as he is also called, and who has got several wives and several children, including some who are sired with the girls who were brought home to work for him or for his wives. And when we come, therefore, to Pauline orthodoxy, and you know, St. Paul is the one dominant voice within the New Testament, in spite of the fact that he was never with Christ at any one point as such. There is Pauline orthodoxy, about which Christendom is by no means universally agreed. In fact, as early as in the days of the foundation of the church itself, there was the Council of Jerusalem. You can read about the Council of Jerusalem in the Acts of the Apostles, and it was basically a factor of those who had been with Christ wondering about this man, Saul of Tarsus, who was suddenly roaming all over the place, preaching the gospel of Christ when they had never been with him, when he was known to have been the one who was persecuting them. And he comes with his own philosophical thoughts, which have been presented to the world as the gospel. When he says, slaves, obey your masters, for example, how many people are willing today to say, yes, Paul has said that slaves should obey their masters. We Africans have been enslaved by Mzungus, and therefore we should obey our masters. The feminists today would disagree with him when he says, wives, obey your husbands and be submissive, etc. So we are talking about things that are in flux. Finally, my own church, the Anglican Church, broke away from Rome basically because the king wanted to divorce his wife and to marry a different one. He eventually did anyway, and he was excommunicated. The Pope excommunicated him from the Roman Catholic Church, and he went on to form his own church, which was called and is called today the Church of England, and declared himself to be the King of England and the
head of a church
and the defender of the Christian faith. That Christian faith which he defended and defends, and which is now being defended by King Charles, has got polygamy as its springbed.
All right. Okay. I think we've had enough of that, Barak. But even as we're concluding, because I think this is a pertinent issue sometimes we never addressed solely when we come to this gathering, so much politics, but are critical issues of a society that holds us together when it comes to the family unit is very key. When you're talking about the issue of Paul and the epistles, talking about obeying your masters, even in light of that, as you say, it's in flux. You need to take it contextually with that particular given time, even when we're talking about how it was the norm of a day, looking at the ancient Near East and their customs as well. So he was writing in that stream of time with the customs of a day. So, well, we'll leave it.
There's
we'll leave it at that.
His own thoughts, yeah, and which were eventually canonized into the New Testament, and which in itself is also in a state of flux. If you read the New Testament, or the Bible for that matter, you'll find that there are many different versions, and the verses, chapter and verse, in fact, they keep on varying very slowly, nuanced changes being introduced.
Okay. I know we'll get into deep theological issues that for me even I take special umbrage with what Barak is saying. I don't always talking about what you're saying. It is never in a flux for me. That's what I believe. It is constant. It is a perception of men.
You are allowed.
Yes.
Paul himself has told us that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and which as a Christian I believe. But I also am aware and I believe that, and I'm so far a husband of only one wife. Let us get this.
To just establish it. To declare how people sometimes use the Bible as a wax nose. You know, remember the wax nose, you twist it the way you want it to fashion and you to accommodate your own perceptions and your own, customs.
And Paul is this dominant voice, a student of Gamaliel, a Pharisee, student of the Hebrew law, the law of Moses, and so on. But anyway,
let's hear from him as we wind up on it.
Yeah, as we wind up this discussion, I find it very interesting that we are neither here nor there as Kenyans, and the institution of marriage, family, let's say the institution of family actually is under attack, and you find that there are many, as Meshiwa said, children out there who are innocent and they suffer a lot due to mistakes as parents, as husbands, and even as wives, as a society. And I think as we went up, I'll call Africa and Kenyan society, as I was comparing in scientific word, as a prism. You know, when a ray or a ray of light enters into a prism, it branches or diffracted in different directions, and it comes in different ways. So as we interpret our religion, our traditions and culture, I think there should be institutions like the church and organizations that are really entrusted with the children to voice the children's rights strongly. And as families, because as I have said, that there are so many children who are suffering out there because of our mistakes, and that should not happen. So I think somehow, as we continue even discussing this issue, because this thing has no end really, it's something that is continuous because it keeps on changing all the time. But the institutions that are already in place, they should be able to be working to see how they can bring families together, and even the issues of declaration. And I think that's where the Constitution was embracing the issue of polygamy, because I think the drafters of the Constitution who were mandated, they found that there are so many, families that are not, included.
I don't think it was the draft of the Constitution. This came after as an afterthought. The fact that we need an amendment through the Marriage Act.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, the standards of the Constitution, when all the drafters, they didn't envision.
They didn't envision, but what I'm trying to say is that I think it was discussed in Parliament. If I'm not very.
That's what I'm saying. It is not expressed
here
in the Constitution,
but
that is a legislation.
I think it's at some point. It was discussed, and
in 2014
somehow it was allowed, and you were allowed to have allowances for several wives and that. And I think that widow was hoping So to encourage men, particularly men, who could be having other wives hidden somewhere, to come up, because those, as we have discussed here, that the ones who are suffering a lot is not the secret wives, not even the men,
but
they are the children who are very innocent. I think that's why we should be also responsible.
All right.
Yeah,
yes,
and so that
the Constitution at Article 11 says that this Constitution recognizes culture as the foundation of the nation and as the cumulative civilization of the Kenyan people and nation.
Article 1.
No, 11.
11.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah?
Recognize culture as the foundation of a nation and as a cumulative civilization of the Kenyan people and nation.
Yeah? And that the state shall promote all forms shall promote all forms of national and cultural expression
through literature,
the
arts, traditional celebrations, science, communication, information, mass media, publication, libraries, and
other cultural heritage. And other, never mind that they say somewhere else, there's a limiting clause, of course, where they say that things which are shall we say, obnoxious or which are inconsistent with the Constitution or other statutory law will be framed outside the provisions of the Constitution. But you can see that other cultural heritage is acknowledged, recognized, and it will be promoted. And that includes that which we call family.
Right. But you see,
family.
If you look at it, let me just try to interrupt before you take a shot, because I found it very interesting. Even if it's enshrined here in the Constitution as a cultural practice, well, some of the cultural practice, there's some we celebrate, there's some we frown at. And even now we're fighting them, like FGM. It doesn't mean that now we will try and mainstream every culture that really comes to bear if it's working against the societal values, if it's working against the societal, aggregation and unity at the end of the day. So I think people will take to abuse this particular article that you, because I mean, everyone and every facet of our society is an expression of its culture, right? Culturally here, our names are also, I think, given because of the culture behind it. And I'm sure Muluka means something in your culture. Kindiki means something in my culture. Aina means something in my culture as well. So if we say, this is sort of opening a Pandora's box, even if they were the craft of the Constitution, I mean, we can't celebrate and embrace everyone's culture. Let's listen from Kiptum.
I just wanted to comment here about the culture, that this Constitution recognizes culture as the foundation of the nation. You know, a Constitution is a guide. It cannot write all things about culture, all things about law. It picks a few issues and then they are too broad. And that's why there is Parliament. So if we read like this article, and then we see the foundation of the nation is affected, maybe, by this kind of issues about inheritance, then Parliament sits down and has law, and then it becomes a bill signed, and then becomes law. So I think there's nothing wrong with the Constitution. The Constitution is right, it has included everything.
Yes, and again,
the problem is us as people.
How then again do I say, where do we measure the timeline of our culture? Is culture retrospective, or culture also moves forward? Do we have the culture of this particular time that we're living in? If someone really goes to the National Assembly and say, this is our culture as a millennials.
That's why we talk about the cumulative.
That's what I'm saying, the cumulative
civilization.
This is, I think, very critical. Let me ask you, then we wind up. The cumulative is a problem. Because now the cumulative is where we're talking about And I don't want to
No, it's not a problem.
I'll give you my reasons why I think it is.
Dibal, I think you and Barack are slightly involved deeply into the issues of religion, to the extent that we are leaving some of us almost at a loss, because there are certain fundamentals apart from the law and religion. There is the foundation of the Kenyan society. That foundation is different from the society in Tanzania or in Uganda. While we share certain common heritage and history, we have evolved for the last 60 years into different societies. And therefore, these societies must be able to define themselves. The Kenyan culture, what would you say is a Kenyan culture? Kenyan culture, if you are to deal even with our leaders, is a culture of imposing ideas on the rest of us and waiting for you to exit office for those ideas to be reversed. What is the Kenyan culture? The Kenyan culture is the culture of just thumping and saying it is me. Unlike, for example, our brothers and sisters in Tanzania, where the nation becomes the yardstick of good behavior, where the nation, serving the nation, is more of a privilege than a right to say, I'm so and so, I'm the minister, I'm the president, I'm the prime minister. It is, yes, I have an opportunity to serve my country. And this opportunity, I should take it as a privilege and an honor from whoever has conferred to me, whether it's the voter or an authority that has appointed you into that particular position. So I think as we deal with these issues, and as you describe society as a prism where there is divergent unity in diversity, we must also accept that the culture of Kenya is a going concern that we must aggressively defend and develop into something that is unique. Because every leader for the last 4 leaders or 5 leaders that we've had has left some culture in our body politic in such a way that certain things that do not be accepted 20 years ago are now being done. And some things which are being done today will be frowned upon tomorrow because of the way our society is dynamic. There is no culture that can be said to be static. It changes, but as it changes, it is our responsibility to make sure that we are able to guide that particular society for high moral value.
All right, we need to take a short break. I thank you so much, because even definitively we can't really put and point to what Kenyan culture is. And when you're talking about cumulative civilization, people will say we are civilized. You are the one who's talking. We're taking a short break.
Civilization.
You are the one. I think last time you were pointing out Pope. Was it Pope Pius or Pius? Yeah. And now we have also Pope Francis, who has been touted to be one of the progressive Pope that we do have. Where the church also now
don't use expressions like progressive.
But they've said this is a progressive. This is one of the progressive Pope that we've ever had in the history of the Catholicism.
Relativistic,
but it's pointing out to what some of the things that the Pope has been actually condoning right now, like the blessing of...
he denied.
Vatican
denied.
Vatican denied?
Yes.
So there was no pronouncement with the fiduciaries?
That the Pontifex Maximus was misinterpreted.
All right.
And I believe them.
Oh, you believe them?
Yes.
Okay, we take a short break. I think we leave it at that. As they say, religion. Let me not say. We take a short break. When we circle back, of course, we continue with more. Remember, at 8 o'clock, we shall be, of course, beaming our cameras to Elgeyo Marakwet, where we'll be having the burial of Kelvin Kiptum. Our team is on the ground to make sure that you get every detail of this today, wall-to-wall, wire-to-wire coverage that will be beamed out live for